I did the Soteria project, for which I am well known, while I was at the National Institute of Mental Health. Soteria was an experiment that we did for 12 years, based in Palo Alto, but we had two facilities, one in San Jose and one in San Mateo, where we took in people who were young, newly diagnosed as having something called schizophrenia, whatever that is, and there we treated them in a special social environment, staffed by non-professionals, supervised by professionals, but the basic staffing were not non-professionals, and we treated them without neuroleptic drugs as much as we could, which was the vast majority had no neuroleptics for the first 6 weeks, and we compared them with a randomized control group that got what we called, quote, usual treatment on the wards of general hospitals in these two communities. You know, it turned out that the vast majority of the people who went through the experimental programs got better within the first 6 weeks without medications. Some did not, of course, but most did. And if you looked at change between admission and 6 weeks for the two groups, the experimental and the control group, the amount of change was almost exactly the same. Change in level of psychopathology, that is symptoms, were similar, but the difference was that almost none of the Soteria or experimental group folks had neuroleptics, whereas all of the control group had neuroleptic treatment. This even surprised us because we thought that a psychosocial approach would take more time than the drugs would. And so finding comparable decreases in levels of symptoms at 6 weeks is quite surprising for us too. But it's so, it happened. And then we followed them for a total of 2 years, both groups. And at 2 years, the Soteria group as a whole was doing significantly better than the control group. The Soteria group, who were thought the part of the Soteria group that was thought to have the worst long-term outcomes, that is predicted to have the worst long-term outcomes, actually turned out to be gain the most from that kind of a program, because they were really much better than the comparable group among the controls, which was, again, one of the reasons for starting the program was to try and deal with the people who were sort of headed for long-term careers as disabled persons, you know, on SSI, whatever, and to try something experimental on the worst cases, not the best, because if you can affect the worst cases, you've really done yourself a favor. And we did, and they were really the strongest difference was between them and the controls, more than the overall group. The third finding was 43% of the experimentally treated subjects never received neuroleptics during the entire 2 years. And that 43% was also doing dramatically better than the folks who had received neuroleptic drugs. As you can tell, or maybe you can't tell, but as you might expect, these kinds of findings are not, they fly in the face of all of the conventional wisdom about the treatment of schizophrenia. And so the project was controversial, to say the least, marginalized, and was treated as an experiment as if never done by American psychiatry. If you look in these big reviews of treatment of schizophrenia and stuff, the 2 or 3 biggest ones don't even have a reference to the project, despite the fact when they were written there were on the order of 35 papers in the literature about it. So it's not like, you know, oh gee, we missed it. You know, that was a very conscious choice. And actually, I saw some of those reviews. They sent to me, and I said, how can you not at least mention the results of the Soteria project? And that didn't change their mind about not mentioning the results. So you won't find it in the standard sort of guidelines for the treatment of schizophrenia books that are around. So that just tells you how American psychiatry feels about a non-psychopharmacological approach to schizophrenia. They just don't think it's worth even considering. And with, of course, the aiding and abetting of that point of view by the pharmaceutical companies, you know, who have more money than Job, and they're happy to spread it around so that everybody is drugged and hardly anybody gets talked to. The American Psychiatric Association has really just become the American Psychopharmacological Association.